First, Justin Barron gets sent down to Laval. Then, Arber Xhekaj gets called up to Montreal. And the Laval Rocket keep on winning. Everything is happening all at once. Hey there, welcome back to the show. My name is Amy Johnson, and boy, oh boy, do we have a lot of ground to cover this week on the Rocket Hockey Report. We're going to take a look at the 2 games Laval played last week, and yes, as I said, they keep on winning. There's just a smidge of news regarding the roster in terms of recalls and players getting sent down to Laval. And of course, there are some prospects that I want to talk about in the prospect breakdown this week who really stood out last week and get you all set for not 1, not 2, but 3 games on tap for Laval this week, and they are all against North Division rivals. Let's start with last week's 2 games. This was 2 games on the schedule against the Belleville Senators. It was a home-and-home series kicking off Friday night at Place Bell in Laval and then moving to CAA Arena in Belleville on Saturday night. The 2 locales might have been different. However, there were a number of consistencies throughout the weekend. Number 1, Laval ended up with 2 points on both nights. Belleville with 0. Secondly, penalty minutes. And penalty minutes for both teams in both contests. But it wasn't necessarily quite as straightforward as that. Laval really kind of put a hurting on Belleville on Friday night in the first of the 2 games, winning that one 5-2. But there were 48 penalty minutes just for Laval in this game. There were 4. Count them, 4 fights in this game. It was a very testy game. But Jakub Dobeš was in between the pipes. He played a confident and strong game, and Laval absolutely looked like the dominant team on this night. The 2 teams hopped on a bus, drove down the highway to Belleville for a rematch on Saturday night. Belleville took the upper hand early on in that game. The Senators were up 2-0 over Laval early in this game. There was still a lot of animosity going on. There were more fights, let's be honest. But for the second half of this game, Kaskisuo locked in and became a bit of a brick wall, and Laval started to figure out how to score on Kevin Mandolese. There was a bit of a kerfuffle with the goalie as well. There was a moment where former Canadiens organization player Brennan Saulnier, you might remember, he had signed with Laval and played in Trois-Rivières about a year or 2 ago, but never got into any Laval games, and he then went to play for Belleville, and he's always got a bit of a chip on his shoulder when he plays against Laval. So there was a sequence where Saulnier came in and shot the puck, and as he skated by the net, Kaskisuo kind of reached out and gave him just a little bit of a shove, almost kind of tried to tie up his arm a little bit. Whatever was said or whatever happened there absolutely sent Saulnier off, and he comes whipping around the other side of the net through the crease and just full on 2 hands shoves Kaskisuo. Kaskisuo falls backwards right onto his back, and an absolute melee occurs at that point. It was absolute mayhem. The good news is that the Laval Rocket came out with 4 points and left their division rivals with 0 points. In fact, that allowed them to tie Belleville in the standings at 40 points. So they are now sitting at 17, 14, 4, and 2 on the season. They are 8-1-1 in their last 10 games, and they are on fire right now. That record has them tied with Belleville for 4th in the North Division. They're tied with Belleville and Lehigh Valley for 10th overall in the Eastern Conference, and that puts them at 19th overall in the league. In terms of line combinations and the roster for last weekend for those 2 games, not really much had changed from the prior weekend. JF Wolf seems to have found kind of a winning combination, so he's not playing around with it all that much. The only difference was that Nicolas Baudin came in on the 3rd pairing to replace Matthias Norlinder for both of those games. Norlinder was dealing with an illness. Things are going to be much different this week because the Montreal Canadiens making not 1 but 2 blockbuster announcements early this week, the first of which was they have returned Justin Barron to the AHL. Justin Barron last played a game with Laval on December 18th of 2022. There is an absolute logjam at the defensive position, particularly for prospects in the Montreal Canadiens organization right now, and that's even before David Reinbacher or Lane Hutson arrive on the scene. So there has been a bit of back and forth and some healthy scratches. Kovacevic has been sitting out occasionally. So with bringing Arber Xhekaj back up, obviously, even though it was a tough go of things right off the bat for Arber Xhekaj, that adjustment, it only took him about a week to really kind of settle in and accept what was going on. And he seems to have really embraced going down to Laval, getting some experience there. He certainly did great things with Logan Mailloux on that top defensive pairing. And he has kind of renewed himself a little bit. There has been a bit of that, Arber Xhekaj, the sheriff, going out there and taking care of business when he needs to, but that hasn't been the focus of his game in the AHL whatsoever. Instead, he's been working more on playing hockey the right way. And I think that's what has earned him this recall. Kent Hughes last week talked about the fact that he really appreciated and was impressed with the work that Xhekaj had done in Laval over the past few weeks, and also commented on how he thought some of that positively impacted Logan Mailloux as well. And so you have to wonder if perhaps sending Justin Barron down to a team that's playing very well right now, who's competitive right now, maybe he replaces Xhekaj on that top pairing with Logan Mailloux, and maybe that's a kind of a double objective. Continue giving Logan Mailloux some mentors to learn from, while at the same time helping to reignite something in a defensive player's game. So maybe this is a way to get him more consistent ice time, as well as starting to kind of reinforce areas of his game as well. The other component to this is Mitchell Stevens. The Montreal Canadiens also placed Mitchell Stevens on waivers with the intention of returning him to the Laval Rocket, but it's possible Mitchell Stevens could get claimed at this point of the season if there's a team out there who needs a fourth-line center. Let's get to the prospect breakdown, because there are three prospects that I want to discuss this week. Jan Mysak is the first one. Jan Mysak has kind of always been the underdog in terms of forward prospects in Laval for the last couple of years. I was really pleased to see Jan Mysak have himself a night this past week. The Friday night game at home against Belleville, he had a 3-point game. He had 2 goals and an assist on the night. He was the first star on the night. He finished the night +3 with 4 shots on goal, including the game-winning goal. Emil Heineman is also having quite a run of it ever since he was loaned back to Laval from Montreal. Going back to the game prior to getting recalled to Montreal and then continuing since his return to the AHL, Heineman is on a 5-game point streak right now, scoring 3 goals and 3 assists over the course of those 5 games. He actually had a power play goal, which was the game-winning goal in that Saturday night game in Belleville to complete the comeback and get the victory for Laval. Emil Heineman certainly doing consistent work to keep improving, and I would imagine that we'll see him back in Montreal again, maybe before the end of the season. But my standout star for this week, I have to give it to Jan Mysak. He is just a kid who doesn't seem to ever give up on himself, and I think that's a great quality. He continues to push himself. He's not always successful. His development has taken a bit of a hit at times. It's been a roller coaster. He's slower to develop, but on nights like he had last week, you can really see the areas of his game that really shine through, and he's my standout star this week. Okay, on the Laval look ahead, I teased this at the top of the show. There are 3 games on Laval's calendar this week, and they are all against North Division rivals. We are talking about some major potential to really separate teams from the pack this coming week. And they kick things off on Wednesday night at home with a visit from, you guessed it, the Utica Comets. Remember, I said they play the Comets 5 times this month. This will be the 4th meeting between the two. The Comets currently sitting in last place in the North Division. But Laval Rocket fans know how quickly that can change. And keep in mind, the last time these two teams played was 2 weeks ago at Place Bell, and Utica won that game after being beaten by Laval twice in their home barn the weekend prior. So they kick it off with Utica coming to town on Wednesday night. Then they go on the road for 2 games. They play in Syracuse on Friday night. Syracuse currently sitting in 2nd place in the North Division. They have had an excellent run of things over the last 6 weeks or so. And then they go on Saturday taking on the Americans, the Amerks. And now this might change before these two teams meet all the way on Saturday, but as it stands right now, Rochester is just 2 points ahead of Laval in the standings. So again, both of these teams are going to have a lot on the line, a lot to play for on Saturday. If you would like to keep track of all of the details of each of these games, then be sure you head over to the Hockey News' Montreal team site. That's where myself, Chris G, Rick Stevens, and all the members of the Rocket Sports Media team cover the Montreal Canadiens and the Laval Rocket for the Hockey News. You can find that right there, thn.com/Montreal. And hey, if you're enjoying this video and all of our content here on the channel, won't you take a second and just tap that subscribe button and also hit that like button as well. Leave us a comment down below. Are you excited to see Xhekaj go back up to Montreal? What are your thoughts on Justin Barron getting sent down? And did you happen to see that little dust-up between Kasimir Kaskisuo and Brennan Saulnier? It was certainly entertaining. Speaking of entertainment, Shoresy. Very popular show, which also happens to feature former Canadiens first-round draft pick Terry Ryan as part of its cast. Well, in case you missed it, Terry Ryan laced up the skates for an ECHL game at the age of 47 this past weekend. It's made quite a few headlines. It was a very special moment for Terry Ryan. And this past week on the Canadiens Connection podcast, Rick Stevens and myself sat down with Chris Ballard, who is the play-by-play broadcaster for the Newfoundland Growlers, to give us his firsthand accounting, what happened in those 24 hours for all of the planets to align to create that situation that brought Terry Ryan back to pro hockey for one night only. It's an interview you don't want to miss, plus an exclusive interview with Patrick Williams going more in depth about Logan Mailloux and newly acquired Philip Cederquist. You don't want to miss it. And if you did happen to miss that episode of the podcast, well, you can check it out right here, and I'll see you again next week.